we made it into chapter 15, part F, which is prophecy. And of course, we're talking about manifestational prophecy. So we're not just talking about any kind of prophecy, but that manifestational prophecy. And so there's so much to cover here. And I know that I didn't write it all. So I'm going to talk probably a lot about it. So anyway, we'll take off with the book. We'll see where it lands. Manifestations of the gift of prophecy come in three different forms, usually. You've got insight, oversight, and foresight. Insight is the microscope. So you're like, getting it down to the nitty gritty, if you will, on things. Oversight is the aerial view where you are overviewing the whole situation, right? And looking at all the context, both what you see and what you maybe don't see yet, those kind of things. And then you've got foresight, which is obviously it's the telescope where you're looking out into the distance, or if you will, into the future. So insight gives you prophetic understanding of what's happening right now. Oversight gives you the overall understanding of what's happening. Typically, this is going to be for the entire people group or the church. So let's say God's going to use you to deliver a prophetic word or a prophetic message to a church. Let's say you get invited to go preach somewhere or go minister somewhere, and God says, "Hey, I want you to reveal some things to them." Well, in that revealing, he may give you insights about what's going on with the people there. He may be giving you insights about what's going on in that nation or that people group. And based on those insights, you'll understand what you need to do as a teacher or as a shepherd or as an apostle or etc. when you deliver that prophetic word. Now, if you're a prophet, maybe the biggest thing you'll end up doing is drawing people to repentance through understanding what those insights are. Usually the Lord is going to have you address some kind of inconsistency at the same time he reveals to you his redemptive destiny for those people in that moment. A lot of times people aren't walking in the fullness of what they're called to because they don't know what time it is. They don't know what it is that God really would have them doing, especially if that community doesn't have strong prophetic culture. Strong prophetic culture, meaning that, the church or the house has prophets and has consistent prophets, and who has prophets who are sharing what it is God has for that church. They're not going to be missing out on the insights and the oversights. But oftentimes, especially in America, churches don't have prophets. They may have people who prophesy and they may have people who are prophetic, but most churches won't have house prophets. And I don't know why, because it'd be real nice if people would step into their calling and do what they're called to do, because it would help. But in either way, God will use somebody and send them in with insight, oversight, and foresight for a particular people group, nation, tribe, tongue, or even just a kairos opportunity. Sometimes the Lord will use the prophetic to reveal a kairos moment, a kairos opportunity, kairos meaning God's timing rather than chronos, which is the world's timing. Chronos is chronological, kairos is eternal. But it's like the suddenlies. Prophetic words present themselves through manifestations of the Spirit for edification regarding various situations. They work to reveal proper perspective of God's desires in the times we live in and the situations we're destined for. Um, It helps us to understand current circumstances with prophetic insight, even though the surrounding aspects of the situation may not be fully comprehended. Prophetic words may also come to us for the purpose of revealing knowledge of situations that have not yet come to pass. A third of the entire Bible is made up of that type of prophecy. Did you know that? If you read the whole word, you would find out a third of the Bible is prophecy about the future. Especially now, some of it's been fulfilled already, but there's also pieces that haven't been fulfilled. And even the ones that have been fulfilled, when the text was written, it hadn't been fulfilled yet. So it's pretty interesting that when you read the word, you'll find things that were, where God released a prophetic word and then it was fulfilled. Think of Joel 2:28. It talks about where the Spirit would be poured out on all flesh, and sons and daughters would prophesy. Old men would dream dreams, and young men would see visions. And even on his male and female servants, he would pour out his Spirit. That was prophesied by Joel, but fulfilled in Acts chapter 2, several hundred years later, right? So, pretty interesting to look and see what prophetic words were given, then the fulfillment of them, and then to know that there's even more that will be fulfilled, like when Jesus comes back with eyes like fire and a sword in his mouth and all those fun things, right? Prophetic words will come to reveal things, but some may point things out. A third of the Bible is made up of that type of prophecy, such as the messianic prophecies pointing to Jesus as Messiah. Many predictions were made by the prophet Isaiah 700 years before Jesus' ministry on the earth. So imagine God giving Isaiah a picture of the Lord redeeming things and who the Messiah would be and what that would be like 700 years before Jesus ever even ministered on the earth. That's wild. Today, the prophetic word is most influential for keeping us focused on the right topics as we journey through Christian life. It begs the question, do you feel as though you are focused on the right topic, the right thing at the right time? It's one of my favorite things about what prophecy does. It keeps us focused on the right things because prophecy reveals the timing of God. The timing of God is not the timing of the world. So just because it's December 2024, oh wow, look at the date. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's yes, it is. It's a prophetic number. See, it's 12, 3, 24. We have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. That's pretty cool. But even though that's the chronological date, what is God like? What time is it in the spirit? Is it time for harvest? Is it time for something else? Well, I think about Ecclesiastes. Grab my word here. Let's jump into Ecclesiastes and look and see what it says. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says, "For everything there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what's been planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, not steal, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather some stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." What Ecclesiastes is revealing here is that there's a time and season for every matter under heaven. But why is he talking about every matter under heaven? Is he just saying, because it's Solomon, is he just saying, you know, all over the earth? Well, yes, but he's also positioning the earth under the rule of heaven. And what we have to understand is, even though it may be December and it may be 2024 and it may just feel like whatever it feels like in this time, what's happening in the spirit is really what dictates the time and season. And it should be what dictates how we respond to what God's doing in this time and season. If you were to ask me, Tyler, what time is it in the spirit? I will tell you it's time for power, because I'm aware that the Lord is about to release a move of his spirit to release teachers and ministers who will equip people to operate in the power of God. That's what time it is. So he's equipping people and he's about to be giving more experiences of power. You'll see this. You'll hear it on the radio. You'll hear it on the TV. You'll be seeing miracles. You'll be seeing crazy healings. You'll be seeing things pop up all over the place. And Jesus will get the glory. That's what time it is, because he took the church through a season of really understanding salvation. Then he took us through really understanding authority back in the 80s, 90s. Then he took us through really understanding kingdom through the 2000s to 2020. Now there's a shift where he's teaching power. And we had this the other day when we were talking about Revelation 12:10. It says, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom and the authority of our Christ have come, for the accuser of the brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." But those four things, it says, and now the kingdom and the power and the salvation and the authority of the Christ have come. Those are four things: salvation, authority, kingdom, power. And he's been teaching the church, but we're about to go into a season of power. So if you ask me what time it is, it's time for power. And that's the focus right now. Not to be focused on, oh, look at what I can do, but to be focused on, oh, look what God is doing. Look what God wants to do in and through us, and to be willing vessels who will meet him in a place of faith to walk that out and experience the power of God touching people's lives, to be willing and to be present for those miracles, right? So prophetically, I think it's time for power. I think it's a harvest season. And so personally, I respond accordingly to that, to what I feel is what time it is in the spirit, at least for the mandate that he's called me to. And a big part of this is your metron. Okay. Do you know about metron? I think you do know about metron, but we're going to find out just how much you know about metron. We're going to go look at it. Let me make sure I'm sharing the full screen. Aha, I wasn't. All right. So here we are. I'm going to go to, let's see if I get this right. I don't think I got it right. I'm going to Google it real quick. Second Corinthians 10:13. I was only one chapter off. All right. So Paul's saying, but we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence that God has assigned to us, even to reach to you. So this area of influence, if we take it and we look deeper, we're going to find that it is a measure. So we're not going to boast beyond our measure, but within the measure of the sphere which God has apportioned to us. So when you hear people talk about a sphere of influence or a sphere of, uh, there's a sphere of influence, a measure. This is what they're talking about. So you have three words here. First one is ametros, which is personalizing it, right? That's immense measure, without measure. So we're not going to boast beyond measure, but only with regard to the measure. This is your metron word, metron, which means your measure, a vessel for receiving and determining the things. But really, it's this one: the determined extent, the portion measured off, the measure or limit. So, like when the Bible says that each has received a measure of faith, right? It's a similar thing. God has measured out a portion to you for your assignment, something that he requires of you, but it's perfect fit for your life, perfect fit for your calling. And so Paul's saying here, we're gonna boast within the measure, within the portion allotted to us in the sphere of which God's put us in. Let's go look at that sphere word, the canon. So this is a rod. What is a rod used for? Measuring rod. The measuring rod used for measuring the rule, a ruler, a carpenter's line, or a measuring tape. It's a tape measure. The measure of a leap, a definitely bounded or fixed space within the limits of which one's power or influence is confined. Here's your key here. A definitely bounded or fixed space within the limits of which one's power or influence is confined. So there are places that you will be able to function great in your calling. And then there are places where you will find out that's not your place. Like there's a reason And I'll even use Jesus as an example here. He told the disciples, he said, only go to the house of Israel, because Jesus' anointing and mandate in that time and season was he was sent to Israel first. Of course, the mystery of the gospel is that the gospel of the kingdom is available to Gentiles and for them too, like me, a Gentile. But the measure for him was Israel first. So he only went to the house of Israel. He only told his disciples who were functioning in his he went over into Israel, to the house of Israel, and that's where they ministered. That's where they had influence. Paul comes around, and what does Jesus say? He says, I'm going to send you as an apostle to the Gentiles. Even though Paul was a Jew and one of the most astounded Pharisees, so he wasn't just a Jew, he was a super Jew as far as being a Pharisee goes, and one of the top Pharisees. But he wasn't sent to Israel. He wasn't sent to the Jewish people. He was sent to the Gentiles, even though he would run into Jews who were in Greek regions, but he was sent to the Gentiles. Pretty interesting, right? So a province assigned one sphere of activity. Metaphorically, any rule or standard or principle of law for investigating, judging, living, and acting. Okay, now let me throw a cog in the machine of your prophetic understanding, because many of you have been taught something else too. Let's go look at it. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 9 says, and we can even pick it up here. We'll go through 1 Corinthians 3, 4. Love is patient and kind. It does not envy. It doesn't boast. It's not arrogant. Love isn't rude. It doesn't insist on its own way, and it's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. So in this, many have taught that prophetically you'll only know in snippets. You'll only receive incomplete parts of the prophecy. And I'm here to tell you that's not what this means. This doesn't give you the right to prophesy incompletely. Okay, I'm gonna show you why I said that. Notice what it says, for we know in part, we prophesy in part. Meros. Sound familiar? A part, a part due or assigned to one, a lot, a destiny, a measure. Oh, we're getting somewhere now. So what is meros? Oh, it just happens to be the root word of metron. So if I jumped back over to 2 Corinthians 10 and go down to that 13, watch this. Metron. If I go metron, oops, maybe it's not metron. Let's see, a metros. Is this the one? Not that one. Maybe this one. Metron. Well, maybe it's not the root of that word. But it's the same, it's in the same family, right? A part due to assigned to one, a destiny, a measure, something measured out to you. So when this verse is saying what it says, first off, it says love never ends, which means love will go on forever. Prophecies will pass away. Why will prophecies pass away? Because when Jesus comes back, there will be no need for any more prophetic. He will be here judging the nations, binding up the devil, throwing him into chains. The sun and the moon will even be blotted out because there won't be a need for a sun. The Son of God will be the light that lights everything up. That's in Revelation 20 and 22. So you see that love will never end, but prophecies will, tongues will, and even knowledge will. Some will use this verse to say, well, prophecies passed away with the last apostle or whatever. They teach what they don't know. Did knowledge go away too? Because if knowledge went away, I'm going to ask, well, how do you know? Oh, you think you know that things went away, but did knowledge pass away too? Did tongues pass away too? Koraba shaka redediende de la mama saka fiere de boso korebeshetiende de basaka. Redediende na moso korebeshete. Nope, they didn't pass away. So it can't be that either. And prophecies didn't pass away. But in this time, I'm not going to understand prophetic for everything happening in the world. You know how much there's happening in the world? There's 8 billion people in the world. There's too much happening in the world. But God will give me prophetic in full and in full understanding for to be delivered in accordance to the part that he's assigned to me. So in the same way that God has provided for me knowledge from his spirit in full for the measure that he's allotted to me so that I can serve my metron and sphere of influence with full utterance, so that I can prophesy when I need to prophesy, not with incomplete prophecies going, well, I didn't get the whole thing, but maybe somebody else did because, you know, we only prophesy in part. No, that's a terrible understanding, and it's a weak mind. It's a weakness in the church right now that people think, well, I didn't pay enough attention to God, but I'm still coming to you with something I don't understand to release it to you. And then nobody even weighs it to find out because it's supposed to be prophecies are weighed by 2 or 3, right? That doesn't happen either. We just give an incomplete prophecies that are never weighed and then wonder why people are walking around in circles, not knowing which way is up. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Throw a 1 in the chat if you know what I'm talking about, because this is important. We got to get rid of this teaching in the church that says, well, we only prophesy in part. So I can't give the full word. I don't get all of it. Yes, you do get all of it, because this part is the same word. Watch this. Part. Let's go look at this word part again. We prophesy in part. Let's go look at where else this word is used. So we see it as a part, an assigned to one, a destiny, a lot, and a measure, just like a metron. But now let's look at the verses. When he had heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the place of his father, who was afraid to go there, being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. I wonder what word that is, district. Maybe I already know. It's regions, but look, regions. Oh, what do you know? Meros, that part. It's the same word. So the same word that Jesus, that was used when Jesus would go from one district to another, one jurisdiction to another. Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district, to the Meros, to the part of Tyre and Sidon. Now Jesus came to the part, the Meros of Caesarea Philippi. Then he cut them into pieces, put it with them, the hypocrites. In that place, there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Oh, we don't see, here it is coming up again. I taught this on Saturday. For those of you who are in the School of Supernatural Leadership, y'all will see that one if you didn't see it live. But it just keeps coming up. That's funny. But do y'all see what I'm saying here? This part, we prophesy in part. It means you prophesy with regard to your metron, your meros, your measure, your lot, your destiny. And God has given you a destiny, just like he called Paul to be an apostle to the Gentiles, just like he sent Jesus to be Messiah to Israel. And then later we got the mystery of the gospel that it's for the Gentiles too. But people, you have a metron. And when you prophesy in regard to your measure, your assignment, your lot, your destiny, the thing that God has assigned to you. In the same way that over here, Paul is saying we don't boast beyond our limits, but only with regard to the area of influence we've been assigned, right? We don't boast beyond our limits, but we will boast with regard to the area of influence God has assigned. And we look down here at that area of influence, we see that it's not going beyond measure, but operating within the measure in the sphere of which you've been called. And even on this sphere word, he's got his measuring rod. He has already measured out for you an allotted assignment. He's already given you a tribe and a tongue and a people and a nation, or even more nations, depending on who you are in the spirit and what he's called you to. But it's a definite, bounded, or fixed space within the limits of which one's power and influence is confined. So it's really interesting to me that we would take a verse that literally means we prophesy in accordance to the jurisdiction we've been assigned by the Spirit, and then turn that into an excuse to give inconsistent prophetic utterances and justify our absence of intimacy with the Lord. That kind of felt that kind of felt some kind of way. Throw a two in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. Throw a two in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. Prophesy in part. Yeah, prophesy in accordance to your mandate. Did you know that if God were to give me a prophetic word about the King's Company, if he were to give me a prophetic word about fivefold ministry in the nation, if he were to give me a prophetic word about the activation of power, if he were to give me a prophetic word about what we're about to be doing here in Tulsa, I would get the full word, because the full prophetic utterance it's related, and it's I'm going to get the full thing because he's speaking to me in my part, in my metron, in my canon. He's speaking within my sphere of influence that he's measured out and assigned to me by the Spirit. He took his measuring rod and said, for Tyler, this is the measure. Boom, 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 boom. And everything that regards Tyler within this measure, I'll speak to him in full. Because why would he give me limited understanding? He won't. In fact, even if I were to misunderstanding, if anyone lacks understanding, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask the Father who gives generously without reproach. He's not going to give me a piece. And I get it. Maybe somebody else has more insight to give. And I'm totally cool. I'm the guy who teaches fivefold leadership and unity and how to recognize the gifts in others and partner with the gifts in others. So I'm not opposed to other people speaking in. And I'm not saying that the eye can say to the hand, I have no need of you. What I'm saying is stop using this verse as an excuse for your absence of intimacy to justify you giving inconsistent and incomplete prophetic utterances because you didn't have the time to sit with the Lord and get the understanding before you release the understanding. That's what I'm saying, because he'll give you the full thing with regard to the area of influence that you've been assigned, with regard to your metron, your meros, your jurisdiction, your canon, however you want to look at it, your part, your lot in life, your destiny. Within the realm of your destiny, God will speak to you in full, but that's your part. And maybe you serve this tribe and tongue while somebody who has a similar calling and mantle is over here serving a different tribe and tongue, and gives them their part so they can serve those people, while he gives you your part so you can serve your people. And he gives both of you in full so you can serve both sets of people really well. Do I need to keep beating a dead horse? The horse, is it dead? Did we get it? Put a three in the chat if we get it. Okay, three's coming in on Zoom. Let's go. Three's in the chat. All right. That was fun. Now let's come back here. So today the prophetic word is influential to keep us focused on the right topics. Right topics. It's why the Bible tells us not to reject prophecy. The prophetic word reveals the heart of the Father toward his people in respect to each time and season. And when the gift of prophecy manifests, it's usually for groups of people rather than just for individuals. Although it can be very influential for individual ministry if the Spirit wills. But in most cases, you'll have the even the activation of the prophetic word. How do I say this? God will give a prophet or a prophetic leader insights for a community. They'll share the insights for the community in order to activate the realm of faith to believe for prophecy, which often activates now that minister to begin giving individual prophetic utterances too, because within the realm of that dominion, they released the prophetic word, faith is activated, and now people are pulling on the rope. And when they pull on the rope, God activates the minister to minister individually after they've opened up the realm of what God's doing prophetically for that group of people. So while I could sit here right now and say, Father, would you give me prophetic words for everyone on the call? He'd say, yes. And we'd go boom, 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 all the way down the list. But in a lot of times, he would have me bring the full topic, release what God's doing prophetically, which I guess he might have already been doing in this teaching, and then he would activate the individual thing because the corporate thing activates the individual's faith to pull on God for the individual thing. Does that make sense? The corporate thing activates the faith in the individuals to pull on God for the individual prophecies. And oftentimes that's how it'll happen. I'm not saying it's a rule of thumb. I'm just saying it works like that a lot of times. Okay. That was fun. That was a little gem. Okay. When the gift of prophecy manifests, it's usually for people groups rather than individuals, although it can be influential for individual ministry if the Spirit wills. Prophecy can be spoken over churches, cities, regions, nations, or even the whole world. Typically, when personal prophecy occurs, it's in tandem with the gift of exhortation so that the guidance and counsel can work to edify the recipient. Now, this is where I'll tell you most people who think they are prophetic and who think they are prophets, even, and a lot of people who would say, I've been moving in the prophetic for years. Most of these people are moving in exhortation. For example, you'll see people who prophesy, quote unquote, like this. I just see you and I see God's placed a mantle on you for leadership. And I see you, uh, I just hear the Father saying, this is your time. So I want to bless you with that. Right? Now, is that prophetic? No, it's not prophetic because the definition of prophetic is not hearing God's voice. That word was an exhortation. It did two things. It identified somebody in a calling and it identified an activating time, but with the time was present, which means there was no prophetic in that. There was hearing God's voice, releasing an exhortation that identified and activated in a moment. That's exhortation. The gift is parakaleo, to summon, to call, to beseech, to teach one, to instruct one, to correct, to console, to admonish, but also to identify and activate. It's something that I love to do. As an apostle, apostles love to activate people. And God can show me. I'll look at somebody, I'll be like, I know who you are in the spirit. I can tell you who you are. I can tell you what your gifts are. I can tell you how you're going to function. I can tell you these things because that's how God would use me. And sometimes he'll drop prophetic on top of it. So here's the difference. Let's go back to my example. Okay, I see this. I see God's put a mantle on you of leadership, and he says, now is your time. Within 3 months, you're going to begin to see men coming one by one, two by two, three by three. And before you know it, you're going to see communities of 30s and 40s in multiple cities where you lead men through some kind of online deal that leads to multiple communities of men in maybe in your region, maybe even across the nation, where men begin to follow a pattern that you put together for discipleship. And I see that coming and being activated in the next 3 months. Okay, so a word like that is both exhortation and prophecy, because not only does it have the activating, identifying, and section of the exhortation, but then it says in the future, and I see into the future in 3 months, you'll begin to see these things taking place. And that the prophetic word now is activating those pieces into the future to take place. And it reveals the timing of the Lord to give time and seasons and signs. Typically, so a prophetic word will typically come with times and seasons and signs that will bear witness to the time and season so that you'll know it's being activated. Like when Jesus came into the earth, there were many signs, a star in the sky, virgin birth. There were many signs confirming the time and season of the Messiah. When the end comes, there will be what? Signs of the times. Yeah. Why? To confirm what God is doing. So oftentimes prophetic will have, yeah, I do too, Donna. I just don't know who it was, except I think I know who it was. But I don't even think he's on here. Well, maybe somebody's listening on the other side. But yeah, that one felt kind of real, didn't it, Donna? Okay, so I lost my train. Where's the glory train? I lost my train of thought. Okay, well, I'm just gonna get back over here then, because I don't remember where I was when I saw that. But I do think that was a real word. Yeah. Okay, when the gift of prophecy manifests, it's for people. All right. And in tandem with gift of exhortation. So you just got to understand the main point to this is prophecy means something. That word means something, and it means some specific things. In the same way, exhortation, which is a different gift, also means something. And it doesn't mean the same thing as prophecy. But we've become lazy in our teaching. And instead of teaching word of wisdom, word of knowledge, prophecy, tongues, interpretation, exhortation, how to function in mercy, how to do A, B, C, and D, and instead of teaching on all the gifts and what they actually are, we said, oh, you know what? Let's just call anything that sounds like hearing God's voice, let's just throw that under this umbrella and call it the prophetic. And we'll have a prophetic school or a prophetic movement or a prophetic something. You got people out here throwing the label prophetic, like this is a prophetic knife. This is a prophetic cup. Yeah, we have a Bible study. It's a prophetic study. What does that mean? All it means in most cases to people is that what we're doing involves listening to God. And do you know how stupid that is? Like, why would anything we do not come from hearing from God? Like, and why do we have to label something prophetic so that we can say, well, God's going to be involved? Why isn't he not involved in everything? You know what I'm saying? Does this make sense to you? So we don't just have to throw prophetic on something. Like prophecy's cool, but it's a real thing that has real meaning. And if we just use this term loosely, you will enable a culture that overlooks the weight of what prophecy actually is. And then people will be exhorting people in simple ways, calling it prophecy and thinking they've reached the pinnacle of hearing God's voice and what that can do for people. And you'll see cultures where they go, oh, yeah, we have a prophetic church. It's so amazing. And you go in and nothing's happening. Where's the fruit of the prophetic? Oh, wait, y'all aren't even prophesying. You're just exhorting people. You call it prophecy and you're missing out on what God could do in your life. You know, and you think you're prophetic, but you don't even have prophets. And you think things are happening kingdom, but you don't even have fivefold. That's not going to work. If you want the real deal, you have to do all the things. And I get it. Most churches aren't. So I'm not going to go in and be like, this is blah, 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 and be mean. You know, I could walk into any church right now and tell them what I think about how they could function and how they could begin walking in the fullness of the fivefold and experiencing more power and more understanding and more equipping and more of the fullness of what I think God has for them. But I don't unless he tells me to. See, what happened was the devil got mad. I must have been preaching too good, y'all, because my internet cut out. But the good news is I pay for this extra hotspot, so I just turned that on, and we back. So, okay, what now? I must continue talking about the fact that prophecy is not this blanket that we or this umbrella that we just throw anything that's related to hearing God's voice under the umbrella of prophecy. We'll miss so much if we do that. People go, "Oh yeah, yeah, I didn't know that's what word of knowledge was. Oh yeah, I didn't know that that's how you move in word of wisdom. Oh wow, I didn't understand that that's what exhortation was. But I've been prophetic for 20 years." And I think that ultimately this falls back on the teachers. Teachers need to teach. Not and prophets don't need to just prophesy. Maybe they should teach the truth that it's not all called prophecy. Most of the sermons we hear are actually preached in the spirit of prophecy because they're testifying, preaching messages that they've spent time inquiring of the Lord to understand what the people need for the season they're in. That's pretty cool. That can be exhortation. It can also be prophetic in nature. But because of this, we got to be careful how we receive the words that are given. We live in a time when social media and the internet can provide us with instant teachings by powerful preachers and even powerful prophets. And any of us can get on the internet and find a teaching on any topic. But every time we do this, we need to ask ourselves, who was the message intended for? When was the message given? And where was the message given? Because if you think about it, in the same way that God gives you a measure, a portion, a meros and a metron and a canon, all in the same time, at a unique time, to release something at a time for a people so that something can happen for those people at that kairos moment. That's all like really important. But what happens is people will take a prophetic word that was for a specific people at a specific time for a specific reason and put it on YouTube. And so somebody can find it 3 years later and then think that that prophetic message was for them when it wasn't. And even if they could learn something from it, people are now depending on prophetic words that were given years ago to different people in a different time in a different place for a different purpose and taking it as God's daily word for them, not recognizing the word wasn't for them. And I guess while we're on the topic, let me go ahead and snuff this other thing out. Just because you give a prophetic word to somebody or an exhortation to somebody does not mean that it's for everyone. And that's so another lazy thing that I'd love to just snuff out while we're at it is this weird thing people do where they go, prophesy over one person and say, oh, and if that resonates with anyone else, just receive it for yourself. Guys, can I just tell you something? That is so stupid and immature for a leader to do that. To say, oh, if that resonates with you, just receive it for yourself. Why would you have people who barely even read their Bible in most cases? Why would you encourage those people to take some kind of spiritual message that was intended for one person and try to apply it to their life? And they're now going to start believing that what was prophesied over another person, God was actually prophesying it over them because it's what they wanted. So you have this word that's like, God's going to restore your marriage. If that resonates with anybody, take it for yourself. Now you got people over here believing that God gave them a prophetic word about their marriage when he didn't. Not that he won't restore the marriage. Hopefully he will. But do you understand what like the problems it can cause when we just nonchalantly say, "Oh, here's a very powerful and important prophetic word for one person, and if anyone else wants to receive it for themselves, go ahead." And then they spend the next 20 years of their life trying to fulfill or walk out some word that wasn't even intended for them? Are you kidding me? How immature. And how are we going to get what are we going to do about these people? These leaders that do this? We need to tell them. Be like, hey, I noticed that you said if anyone in the room wants to receive that word, they can receive it too. You should stop saying that because the word wasn't for them. It's not, that's not the way it works. You don't take a personal word that's meant for somebody and then just open it up to anybody. That'd be like God saying to Paul, when he knocked him down and he struck him blind and he said, I'll show you how much you have to suffer for my name. And the other guys who were sitting there next to him, they could hear the voice, but they didn't see who was stalking, but they could hear a voice. So they heard it too. What if Paul would have just got up and been like, hey, you guys, you can receive that for yourself. Y'all could be called as an apostle to the Gentiles too. And then these guys try to go walk out Paul's destiny. Do y'all understand how ridiculous it is? Like there's a difference between corporate word for the whole group and personal word for the individual. And because I'm bringing this up so that you know, even if the minister does say, if that resonates with you, receive it for yourself. No, this is not witchcraft land. So don't do it. Don't receive stuff and try to receive some spiritual impartation from God that was intended for somebody else. It's a waste of time and space. And it just says, honestly, that you're probably not intimate enough in your relationship with God if you're desperate to borrow somebody else's prophetic word so you can get a butterfly in your stomach and believe for something again. It's like something's wrong if that's where you're at. And something's wrong with the leadership that promotes that. Does that make sense? I'm just going to leave it at that. Hopefully I got my point across on not just taking a personal word and saying, oh, that, go ahead and receive that for yourself. Walk in it. No way. It's lazy. It's lazy leadership is what that is. But if we ask the question, who was the message intended for? When was the message given? Where was the message given? That'll help us understand that the teachings we have access to may have been given for a specific purpose at a specific time to a specific group of people for reasons only known by God and possibly that person who was teaching it at the time. And although the principles given in the messages are applicable to Christian living, they may not be priority for focus in our lives. We have to always inquire of the Lord to find out where he's leading us in our studies. To be clearer, God may be directing us to focus on a topic of forgiveness or repentance so he can reveal a new level of faith in our lives that's specific for the season we are about to endure. If we don't ask him what he would have us study, we might be reviewing something that's not even along the line of the topic. We might be trying to learn about the difference between wisdom and knowledge instead of the truth about repentance and forgiveness, and then find ourselves in need of faith and lacking that understanding when we're attacked and put in a place of guilt and shame and rejection by the enemy. But God would have protected us from it had we not been distracted by some other shiny object. God can see ahead into our futures. He's willing to reveal to us his will for our lives by the voice of his spirit. This is the purpose of the prophetic word. The Holy Spirit works to reveal prophetic wisdom to us so that we're led by his voice in every season of our lives. Oh, I love that it's here because I was about to pull it up. Proverbs 29:18 is such an important verse. It says, where there's no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. That means they'll just do whatever the hell they want. Literally. They'll just do whatever they want. Why? Because they don't have any prophetic vision. They don't have anything to follow. They don't have anything to stick to. So without prophetic vision, people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law, which means that when you have the word from God, you can walk in it and you can hold yourself accountable to that. And you can set your boundaries and limitations in that season upon what has been spoken and declared over your life, which means if God says, hey, I've called you to focus on your family right now. I've called you to begin to prepare because I'm about to take you into A, B, C, and D. And I need this season to be a season where you build stronger bonds with your family, where you get things ready because it's about to be looking like this. Okay, now guess what? You can say no to everyone who invites you to something, and you can say no to people who want to be a part of all of your time, and you can say no to these things, and you can do it with a smile on your face because the reason you're saying no is because of what God spoke. Now you're putting on restraint, and you're able to say no to the wrong things so that you can say yes to him and his thing. For the Lord God does nothing without revealing his secret to his servants, the prophets. This is why you need prophets in your life. If you don't have prophets in your life, let me just be the bearer of good news. Yes, you do. They're at the King's Company, and all you got to do is say, hey, Tyler, I need some prophets in my life. And I bet we could help you out with that. I bet we could get you in a prophetic roundtable. I bet we could help you, get connected and hear some things from the Lord for your life so that you will know what you should restrain yourself to. And with that, I know I'm 10 minutes over, but it was fun. It's been real and real fun. So I'll see y'all later. Keep up the good work. Tomorrow we'll talk about discernment of spirits. Spooky. No, it's actually really fun. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. See you soon.